Let's take a moment to get back into our body after the day that we've just had, or the night that you've just had. Direct your attention to the breath as it's coming in through the nose, and follow it down as far as you can into the body, perhaps as far down into the belly, so that you can feel the belly expand with the inhalation, like a balloon filling up just to where it's comfortable. And then allow it to collapse back down. And even though the air is being expelled back up and out through the nose, allow your awareness to stay down in the belly where the breath left it. Do this a few times, watching the breath come in through the nose, tracking it all the way down the windpipe, through the chest, into the belly, and then deposit your awareness in the belly as the breath escapes back out. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about depression and sad or low moods. And the first thing that I would suggest that you become aware of, if you are somebody who has dealt with depression, especially for a long time, and especially if you're somebody who has had a reprieve from it, and then as soon as you start to notice changes in the body or the mood that indicate that you're feeling a little sad or just emotionally low or even run down and tired, notice the inclination to immediately label that as depression. Notice if you have thoughts that come up saying, oh, I hope I'm not becoming depressed again, or I am feeling depressed, or what if the depression comes back and I have to seek help for it? The first thing to remember is that depression is just a label. What you're feeling isn't depression. What you're feeling is maybe something more primal, like sadness or overwhelm or worry. Where depression starts to seem like its own entity is when you start thinking about these emotions that you're experiencing, and when you start having ruminative thoughts where you keep coming back to the same issues over and over and over throughout the day, and you actually worry about being depressed. And it goes a lot deeper, and it is a bit more complicated than that. But there's a lot that we can work with just at that beginning level. There are a couple basic strategies for working with depression or sadness or low mood. And the two first basic approaches would be to either focus inwardly on the actual experience of the sensations, or to focus outwardly away from the experience of the sensations. You can choose what works best for you in the moment. But I would suggest that in cases of extreme overwhelm, extreme sadness, where it really feels like you're caught in a trap and you can't escape it, or it feels like things are becoming dangerous for yourself, then focusing outward might be more immediately beneficial. So we'll try that to begin with. So if you are feeling particularly overwhelmed by unpleasant emotions, and if you find that you can't stop the thinking, that you keep having recurring thoughts again and again, and if you keep telling yourself that you are depressed and this is never going to end, then stop for a moment whenever you can remember to do this. If it is too uncomfortable to come into the body, pick a sense field outside of you. So if you're in a place where you can open your eyes and look around and find something that is either neutral or even positive, use all of your attention in your visual field to observe the things in your room. Now, you can do a see, hear, feel type practice where you see out and just become aware of the shapes and the colors of the different objects in the room, and just label them as seeing, reminding yourself that you are simply seeing something in your direct visual experience. And every couple seconds, you can let your attention wander to the next visual experience and absorb whatever those colors and shapes are. Absorb them like you're inhaling them into your body. Like you can become one with whatever those external shapes and colors are. It doesn't matter what the object is, as long as it doesn't spark more intense, unpleasant sensations. And allow the attention in the visual field to just float every 2 or 3 seconds from one object to another, or If your attention keeps being pulled to the same object, that's also great. Just label it C every time that you notice it again. It can also help to actually label objects in the room with their own name if you are feeling particularly unstable or stressed. So just simply noticing chair, table, artwork, lamp, telephone, whatever you see, in as calm of and a dispassionate voice as possible. The calmness of your own voice will actually help soothe your nervous system. And the whole purpose of focusing outward is because all the symptoms of depression are happening inside the mind. So whereas we would often use see in and actually look at the images appearing in the mind, if they're becoming too disturbing for you in this moment, it's okay to focus away from them for now and get some reprieve. Another option is to use your eyes to trace the outline of the objects in the room. So with as much detail as possible, keeping your head straight and stable at the object. Just allow the eyes to trace it, trace the outline of the object from one side to the other, and maybe back again. For some people, it can also be very helpful and very grounding to do these same sorts of exercises with the auditory sense. So you're going to focus on hearing out. It may or may not help to close your eyes while you do a hearing out practice. But begin by listening to any sounds that are in the room. And just like we did with the see out, you are going to simply notice the different sounds, label it only as hear, and allow those sounds to fully absorb into your experience. After you have allowed the attention to bounce from one sound to another every 2 or 3 seconds, start to see what the most distant sounds are that you can hear. It might be further away in the house or whatever building you're in. It might be outside the window or outside the walls. It might even be traffic noise coming from miles away. Just label it here and don't be concerned with what it is that's making the sound. Just be very curious and very absorbed into whatever the sound actually is. Again, this directs us back away from the internal thoughts. And for most of us who have or have had depression or other similar low mood states, so much of it is fueled by thinking. There can be a thought about something that has happened in your life, something that you did wrong, something that someone else did to you, something that is not the way that you would like it to be right now, something that you are not looking forward to happening in the future. And all of these things are just sounds happening inside the mind. It's very easy to get caught up with identification to these thoughts. And that identification makes them seem very real, tangible, important, like they're really talking about us and our lives. But they aren't. They're just mind chatter. And then you can have these perseverating loops of thought commenting on the previous thought and identifying with those thoughts. But that identification is itself just another thought. So if we find that we can't get away from the mind chatter, we can always turn our attention to the external sounds. And it might continue, but if you don't continually pay attention to it, what does it matter? A person in the room can be saying all sorts of horrible things about you, but if you have headphones on and can't hear it, who cares? In the same way, thoughts in the mind can say whatever they want, but it doesn't have to land anywhere. It doesn't have to be believed. So if you feel like you aren't up to encountering those thoughts as just thoughts and being able to dispassionately witness them without identifying them, then just turn your attention outward to the sounds in the room and the sounds around you. All of these outward based techniques are very helpful in a moment of crisis. If you really feel like you can't handle what's going on inside the mind, it's nice to know that it is possible to turn away from it to someplace more expansive, someplace safer, someplace quieter. Even if you're in the middle of a city, surrounded by traffic and people and any other sort of noise, that can sometimes be quieter than the voice in our own head. However, as useful as these tools are in a crisis, they aren't necessarily going to heal you or provide you with the type of insight that might stop the potential for depression in the future. For that, when you feel like you can handle it, we have to turn into the body. We turn towards the actual thoughts themselves. And even more uncomfortable sometimes, we turn towards the sensations in the body that accompany those thoughts. Now, at first, we might think that we have to go deep into the roots of our trauma, the roots of our earliest wounds. And in some ways, that might be beneficial, but it's not really necessary. Our wounds and our traumas all happened in the past. It might have been many, many years ago, or it might have been hours ago, but they aren't currently happening now. So, whatever it was, when you feel those sensations arise in the body, it's okay to sit with them and to feel them and to allow them to be there, because they are not the actual experience happening again. They are just a response to a memory. And no matter how real a memory seems, it is not currently happening right now. It is just another image or sound in your head. So if you have a situation that comes to mind frequently, or perhaps thoughts that are of a self-deprecating nature, thoughts that belittle yourself or doubt your abilities to be in the world, that say that you're not worthy or not good enough, feelings that blame you for something, feelings that inspire shame, thoughts that inspire feelings of guilt. Thoughts of anger, particularly self-directed anger. Thoughts that bring about a sense of fear of the future, fear of something happening again. As uncomfortable as they may be, we can sit with any of these. So if right now you have a thought in your mind that is making you feel what you would normally call depressed or sad or unworthy, or perhaps stressed or overwhelmed, bring your awareness down into the body, perhaps into the chest. If you can't find your way there initially, tune into the next inhalation coming in through the nose and follow it down into the chest so that it feels like your attention has been deposited there. And simply become aware of what it feels like in the muscles of the body. Do you feel that your posture is somehow contracted? Do you feel a sense of tension somewhere, perhaps in many places? Do you feel burning or tingling or pressure? Perhaps a sense of queasiness? Scan not only your chest, but scan your throat. Scan up through your face for any signs of tension or contraction or unpleasant sensations that you ordinarily might want to run away from. And expand down into the sternum and into the belly. Feel your way through the shoulders and down the arms and hands. Check the lower half of the body, the legs and the feet. Find any places that those thoughts seem to be causing sensations that might be related to a certain emotion. It's something which we talk about frequently in the meditation world and in the awakening and non-dual world. But it can't be said enough that emotions are nothing but physical sensations with a label attached to them. And that label might be a story, it might be a name, it might be many things. But it's all just mind made. And what really counts is what's being found and felt in the body at this moment. So if you find that there is profound discomfort someplace in the body, see if you can just be with that sensation. And this is not done in a masochistic way. This is not a form of self-discipline or torture. Instead, we're actually holding that sensation, if possible, with a space of lovingness, with a space of compassion, because something happened to that body. Something happened that caused it to want to defend itself from that experience happening in the future. Something happened that it felt it needed to protect itself from. And so it tensed up the muscles and it contracted the body to make itself small so that it wouldn't be seen and couldn't be harmed. It protected itself as best it could. And now, anytime a thought comes that reminds the body of that situation, it tries to protect itself again. So, as counterintuitive as it might seem, you can actually thank the body for doing this. Thank it for doing its best to protect you. Thank it for having your own best interest at heart. You can actually perhaps feel a sense of gratitude for these processes that are happening automatically to try to keep you from feeling similar pain again and again throughout your life. You can feel grateful for it. And you can feel compassion because the body is giving something up every time it does this. It's giving up a sense of ease and relaxation. It's shutting down in parts in order to protect the rest. So feel compassion for its sacrifice. Let that inspire a sense of gratitude. Often with depression, we get lost in these negativity biases where we only remember things that are wrong with our lives, and everything that is positive becomes a blind spot. Sometimes it's not even that we're willfully ignoring them, we just cease to be able to see them. So by turning this around and having a feeling of gratefulness towards the body, it starts to open us up to being able to see what we're grateful for in other aspects of our life. And that can help to derail these depressive mind loops. If you find it too difficult to be compassionate or grateful for these sensations or for this body, and if you find that you're automatically rebelling against that idea and thoughts are arising saying that you just can't do that, that it's just too painful, see if you can be okay with those thoughts being there. Nilla Damore has a wonderful question that she recommends you ask. Can I be in a body that feels this sensation right now? And if your answer is no, then ask yourself, can I be in a body where the answer is no right now? Can you have acceptance of the fact that you won't accept it or can't accept it in this moment? And by doing that, you can actually have acceptance and feel the acceptance in the body. If you can tune in and feel these physical sensations related to an emotion that has been recurring or is happening right now, and if it's too uncomfortable to touch directly, see if you can find a sense of space around it, sort of a bubble from which you can observe the sensation without actually engaging directly with it. Sort of a safe zone that holds it and allows it to be there for as long as it wants to be there. To begin with, it might only be comfortable to do this for a few seconds, but as you practice, you can perhaps extend it to minutes and then longer. Remember to keep breathing while you are feeling these sensations. It can be very tempting to contract so much that the breathing stops or becomes very shallow, barely making its way past the collarbone. But allow that breath to be deep and rich, and let it fortify you and give you the strength to be able to hold that discomfort with a sense of ease and peace and equanimity. Next, we're going to actually notice the thoughts themselves. And something to be very aware of is not just the fact that you are thinking, but we want to be aware of the content of the thoughts. Not because we want to get wrapped up in the stories or in identification with the content, but just so that we have a sense of the sorts of thoughts that are happening. You can note whether you're having a lot of memory thoughts, thoughts about things that have happened in the past and are not currently happening now. Or are you thinking a lot about the future and what may happen that you don't want to happen, or what might not happen that you would like to happen? We are rarely complaining about our present, but notice if you are having thoughts wishing that something in this very moment right now was different. And as these thoughts arise, you can label them past, present, or future. And this is something you can do throughout the day. It might even be helpful to make a little practice out of this with a notepad and a pen, and just sitting there for 10 or 15 minutes, make a column for a past, present, and future on the paper, and just simply put a little check mark into each of those columns with every thought that you notice. And afterwards, you'll have a better sense of how frequently you're thinking thoughts about the past or the future or the present. And you can get a flavor for how negative those thoughts might be. Is there constant criticizing self-talk? Are you always complaining about the way things are or were and how they're not the way that they should be or could be? Don't judge yourself for that. Just notice it. We want to become aware of the habits of the mind. And for this, it helps to have space from the thoughts, to recognize that we are not our thoughts. We are not thinking them, and they do not reflect anything about who we actually are. It can be difficult to believe this at first. So this is why we have all sorts of meditation practices to just observe the thoughts from a distance and realize that there is space around them. There's space between the awareness that is aware of the thoughts and the thoughts themselves, and that the thoughts seemingly appear from nowhere, exist for the briefest flicker of a moment, and then disappear again. So as long as we aren't latching onto them or continuing to make new stories about them, thoughts are always very short-lived. So just become aware of the flavor of your thoughts. Sometimes they're neutral. Occasionally they might be positive. But notice if they're very often in the negative, critical side of the spectrum. And again, you don't need to change this. You don't need to intentionally push away those thoughts or try to create more positive thoughts. Simply having the awareness that this is happening can be enough to put that space between you and the identification with those thoughts. Just like a TV on in the room, whether it's playing a comedy or a horror film, doesn't really matter. It doesn't really affect you, especially if you are aware that it's just a television and not something that's happening in the room. You can develop the same relationship with your thoughts. So notice if you're feeling self-pity or any sort of rumination, and notice again how those sort of thoughts inspire unpleasant sensations in the body, and how that unpleasant sensation in the body then causes an often immediate repulsion in order to distract from it. And that distraction could come in the form of more thoughts to take you back into your head and back out of the body. Or it might come in emotional eating, or it might come in crying or yelling or getting angry, exploding at somebody else. It might come in self-harming behaviors, anything that gets us away from those sensations. So we are learning that we can actually be with those sensations without having to turn away from them, without having to distract ourselves, essentially without bypassing what we're feeling. We realize bit by bit that we are strong enough to withstand these simple sensations in the body. And the more you observe them, the more you will find that they actually aren't what you once thought they were. No matter how intense and disturbing they might seem at first, if you can focus your attention into them, really absorb into the actual sensations and the tensions, breathe into them and allow them to expand bigger and bigger so that you can see through them like a cloud of smoke that begins as a very dense little ball, but then disperses throughout the room so that it's so diluted that you can't even find it anymore. Allow your attention to absorb into the sensations and allow the sensations to expand outwards. So that you are indistinguishable from this space, and this tension is indistinguishable from the space. And when you're feeling these things, notice if more thoughts are coming. And you can simply label them as thought, or perhaps as positive, neutral, or negative. But don't get caught up in them. It's just a story that doesn't concern you. It's just somebody chattering on whose opinion doesn't really matter to you. Allow the body to move in any way that it feels it needs to. Sometimes it needs to get rid of these stuck energies, these stuck sensations, and just allow it to happen. You can breathe into them. You can allow them to relax. And you can just let the body do naturally what it needs to do to heal and release. You don't have to willfully do anything. Just hold space for what the body needs to do to heal itself. Simply being is enough. Being and allowing. and remembering to just be here in this moment. Because even though those thoughts might be about the past or about the future, thoughts can only ever happen right now. So as long as you are seeing the thought or hearing the thought, you can't help but be present right here in the moment. And if you feel the body moving, feel that right here in the moment. And if you feel the body being still, feel that right here in the moment. There can be very comforting, a comforting discomfort for people who have had depression or some form of constant low mood disorder for a long time. It's familiar. And even if the sensation is uncomfortable, there is a comfort with any sort of familiarity. So be honest with yourself about that. As much as you would like to get rid of the depression or are afraid that it might come back, be honest if you feel a slight charge of safety, just knowing that it's familiar. And if there's perhaps a hint of fear at giving away that safety for the unknown of a life free from depression, it can be very easy to create identifications and identities for ourselves as a depressed person or a sad person or a person with a history of trauma or problems. And it's very comforting because it locks us into something that we can define. And giving up that sense of identification with those labels, we're free to move. We're free to go wherever life takes us. We're free to relax and open up and let go into the flow of whatever is going to happen without second guessing it, without putting up barriers and protections to keep us locked in our own little protective cages. It's a big, wonderful universe out there. And if we feel like we are a tiny creature who is pitted against it, it can be scary. And so we create these self-enclosed bubbles of protection. But it's okay to drop them. It's okay to heal. It's okay to feel what needs to be felt and to open up to the possibilities that come your way. It's okay to say yes when the body feels like it wants to say yes. And it's okay to say no if the body feels like it wants to say no. But being able to discriminate between the two is incredibly important. So we need to get in touch with the body to be able to move freely in the world without concern. And we'll never get in touch with the body if there's so much sadness and so much discomfort in there that we retreat every time we try to look into it. And this is why we do these practices, because we're letting out these old stuck emotions, we're letting them heal, and we're making more space in the body. We're making more ease and comfort in the body. We're making the body a more comfortable place to live, like a house that has a hoarder living in it, and it's so cluttered that you can't even walk through one room. And so it's just easier to stay out and never go near it. We are clearing out room by room of the body, making it more hospitable so that we can feel into the body and stay there and feel how good it is to be in the body, to feel how much pleasure and joy there is to be found and felt in the body, and that it's not all tension and contraction and sadness and sorrow. That can be there, and you can have compassion and space for it to simply be and then self-liberate. And you're developing strength in yourself, strength in the knowledge that you can handle these sensations when they arise in the body. And you're also noticing what these sensations are so that when you're in your regular life and you suddenly feel an overwhelming emotion, it's not just a tidal wave of emotion that's going to sweep you away. You can recognize, oh, this is simply physical sensation in the body. And there's a thought about this being depression. There's a thought about this being a sense of unworthiness. There's a story attached to this that I'm still believing. And in that moment, when you can clearly see that this is simply a story and physical sensations in the body, the wave collapses. It's no longer a wave. It becomes separate, manageable parts that aren't connected, that aren't related to each other or to you. It's simply something that you can witness, experience, provide space for, and then watch as it goes away all on its own. Don't identify, don't create stories, just allow it to be. And we can do these things anytime we need, throughout the day or night. And the more we use these tools, the more automatic they become. To begin with, you might have to remember to look into experience when you're experiencing it. You might have to remember to turn away if things get too strong. But over time, you'll develop an automatic repertoire of these tools that work for you. And they will just happen instantly when you are encountered with these painful emotions or ruminative thoughts or chronic worrying or chronic self-destructive habits or self-destructive, self-recriminating thoughts. And at first, you might notice after they have happened that they got away for a little while and then you caught them. But over time, you'll start to notice while these thoughts are playing in the mind and while you've been caught and have identified and run away with them, you'll notice while it's happening and you'll be able to just sit with it and allow it to end on its own without prolonging it. And then with time, it'll start to happen sooner and sooner in the process so that the briefest flash of physical sensation associated with a specific emotion will be enough to trigger these tools, perhaps even so much so that you don't need to do anything at all. You will automatically have the space to just notice and witness these emotions and sensations and thoughts arising and breaking apart and dispersing. And eventually, it's possible that you'll encounter situations that once would have triggered these uncomfortable emotions to arise, only to find that they no longer trigger anything. It doesn't matter if that never happens, because you can handle whatever happens in any moment as long as you deal with it specifically in just this moment. Stay present, stay here, stay in the body. You can take a few deep breaths and wherever you are or were, begin to come back to the room, back to the awareness of the body, of the space around you. And then you can slowly, when it feels comfortable, open your eyes.